Words are about to be spoken on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, brought to you by the Ad Free Shows Podcast Heat and Wrestling According to Alba Networks. We are live on WrestlingAccordingToAlba.com. I am your host, John Alba, joined by the broken one, the welcome one, the spoken one himself, Mr. Matt Hardy. What's going on, my friend? You're on location this week.
I am at location. I am here in Atlanta, in the beautiful
live via satellite, if you will.
Live via satellite. We're live, pal, via satellite. I just walked into my hotel room. We're sitting down. We're getting this episode knocked out, put it in the can so John can get it going bright and early Friday morning, 6 a.m., as he always does so wonderfully. And got a big night tonight. I am here for The Hills Have Eyes 3 or 4. It's the West Side Gun promotion, and I find myself in a 3-way ladder match tonight along with Brother Nero. So that's going to be interesting. And it's only the beginning of the craziness, because tomorrow night we're defending the TNA World Tag Team titles in a tables match against the System. So it's going to be crazy. And I just saw they announced our match for Saturday, ironically, on my way here to the hotel. It's myself and Jeff defending the titles, if we're still champions, against Sami Callihan and PCO. Hell of a weekend on slate.
Oh, boy, you are going to get the shit beat out of you this week, huh?
It looks like it.
Goodness gracious. Well, the triple threat match you have on Thursday as we tape this, that's against the Infantry, Sean Dean's crew that you know very well. Yes. And a team that I've known for a very long time, Violence is Forever, who are also going to kick the shit out of you. And they're awesome. Kevin Koo and Dominic Guarini. And Kevin Koo and I were messaging, and it is like a dream come true for them to get a chance to face you guys. So I know that's a very meaningful match. And I got to imagine that's pretty cool for you when you're working some of these teams for the first time and they realize, oh, crap, I get to work the Hardys. Like, that's got to be a cool feeling for you as a veteran, I'd have to imagine.
It is. It's neat. I mean, there's people who like it. It's a bucket list item to wrestle the Hardys, while they're still active. And that happens pretty often nowadays. So it is really cool. And it is very humbling and flattering that you have actually accomplished enough that there are people who, have on their bucket list, they want to wrestle you before we finish up doing this.
Yeah, certainly so. So good luck with that. I hope everything works out. We got Pyrus joining us. This is Matt Hardy's world. We're merely allowed to breathe in it, he says.
Well, thank you, my friend. Breathe away.
That allows us to do more than that. You allow us to do more than breathe in it. You're a giving guy.
I'm a benevolent deleter.
Matt Hardy is the king of having to pick and choose his battles. So that's
you got very good at it over the years. Yeah.
You certainly have. Hey, man, you and I got to spend some time together this week, and it was one of the most enjoyable projects I think I've ever done in my life, honestly. Yeah. Why don't you catch everyone up on what we did this week? We teased it for a couple weeks on the podcast, but we're very excited for the world to see what we laid down.
Yeah, it was very cool. We got to go and collaborate with Chef Guga of Guga Foods. He is a guy who is viral on YouTube, a very famous chef, and he is an absolutely amazing chef. I get a shout out, John. John hooked us up. He started working on it. John made this happen. But we went to Miami and we spent a day at Guga's, and he was teaching me how to cook, how to do his particular style, how to master cooking the most expensive steaks you could possibly cook. And I got to do some of that. And the coolest thing was we got to indulge on everything that he and I cooked at the end of it. And it was absolutely amazing. And John, I'm going to let you talk about that because you are the meat specialist here at the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy.
Yeah, man. I think we probably cooked up about $1,500 worth of steaks, I'd say.
Yeah.
We had multiple types of Japanese Wagyu. We had some skirt steaks, some choice choice New York strips. We had A5 ribeye, picanha. It was nuts. Guga is the steak king on YouTube. He's got 3 accounts with millions of subscribers. And I don't know about you, man. I was blown away by his production facility that he's built down there and his staff, the hospitality that they displayed. It was truly incredible, wasn't it?
It was amazing. I mean, they were extraordinary to us. They treated us so great. It was such a great experience. He's an amazing guy, and I love that as we were heading back to the airport with him at the end. He's like, here we go, bring it in, friends for life. And it really is. It really feels like that's the kind of guy he is. That, if you build a relationship with him, you always be in contact with him. He's just such a sweetheart and such a dear soul. And I was just going to say, after we finished all of the eating and doing all this, now they had taught us something, or they taught me something. John, all the tricks and trades of all the meat cooking and making your own sauces and whatnot. But then I was going to teach them something in return. And they were able to procure a ladder, a couple tables, and a chair. So I put Chef Guga through a table. he wanted to fill it, and I just wanted him to fill it, So one of his staff went through a table, and I demonstrated for him, and then he went through a table, and it was a hell of an experience for sure. All his crew lined up, and there's a lot of people say, like, oh man, like, can I get a chop in wrestling? It can't be that bad, right? Like, how do you make the noise? You like slap your leg or whatever. And I chopped all of his crew, and that's going to be a fun little video coming to him.
It was awesome. Oh man, Guga got no spoiler here, but Guga got some color too, which was
hey, brother, red equals green. Guga
it certainly did. I want to give a special shout out to Gangrel's crew at CCW for supplying us with the tables, and Alex Chamberlain, who I've had a chance to work with on the indies a little bit, who came through massively clutch for us for this video too. And you can find that on the Guga Foods YouTube channel. Go subscribe. It's going to be dropping in the first week of January, and just a couple weeks now. 3 weeks. I can't believe we're already there, man.
January 2nd. I mean, we're almost
just nuts.
And you're right. Big shout out to Alex for coming out, and big shout out to Gangrel for loaning us a couple tables to break. They were some pretty badass tables, so I really had to lay it in to go through it. So sorry, Guga.
Yeah, it was amazing. I cannot tell you guys enough how much fun we had. We shot like 3+ hours of content, and we were there for about 5.5, 6 hours. It was just amazing. I was blown away by the production facility. These guys are turning around 9+ videos a week, which is amazing. And as you said, the most important thing, total stand-up dude that Guga is. So
a great human being. That's the best quality you can have in life. Be a great human being. And he was an amazing human being.
Yeah, we are so excited for you guys to see that. Thank you again to the Guga Foods crew for having Matt and I down. There's a lot of crossover between the key demo there, male 1834. Men love their wrestling and they love their steaks. So I feel like that's when I was coming up with the idea. I was like, this is a no-brainer collaboration. And it's funny, Matt, there used to be so much competition in the digital space and social space, but I feel like a lot of people, and the Costco guys are a great example of this, they realize collaboration is key in promoting your projects. And I think that's a really healthy thing for the content creation space,
It really is. Collaboration is beneficial for both parties the majority of the time, because like once you become a social media influencer and you start growing a fan base, then there's also people that like other social media influencers. And if you team up at some point, then they're even more excited to watch the project. And I think it draws new eyeballs to your own personal accounts and whatnot. No, my wife does that. She does collaborations with people time to time, and it seems to be very successful for her too.
The coolest part was he posted an Instagram photo of you guys, and all these famous chefs were commenting on it, which was so cool. They're like, this is not the collaboration I ever expected to see. So I think people are going to be really, and I got to give you props, man. I know you had a great teacher there, but you cooked up a couple mean steaks.
Okay. I mean, he was, I was listening. I was listening very closely. I was an open book, and just whatever he was going to write, whatever he was going to tell me to do, I was going to follow it.
I mean, you were cooking. You're going to see in this video, Matt had a flamethrower that he was using. He was using a flame gun.
Badass.
You cooked a $500 steak, which that must have been nerve-wracking, because if you screw that up, there's no turning back. But it was truly an amazing experience. Cannot wait for you guys to see that. Pyro's saying, did Matt just call John the Meat King?
That's a good name, John the Meat King Alba.
I don't know about that. Not very PG, but nonetheless, it was a great time.
All in context.
Dude, you chopped the shit out of his guys. I can't wait for people to see that video too. It was amazing. And you didn't do no Ric Flair petty side chops, some knife edge chops. You, Andre the Giant, Big Show, chopped the shit out of these guys.
Overhand chop, yeah. I mean, an overhand chop pretty much guarantees you're going to get a loud smack and a good connection with the chest. Sometimes with the side, sometimes people will kind of sidestep or absorb one way, and it's not as solid or whatever. So like this is a guaranteed winner every time if you're giving someone chops.
It was pretty gnarly stuff. I am very excited for that video to drop. I
got to tell you this too, John. You'll do this. So after I got home that night, I was showing the kids. They actually had waited up. They knew I was going to be home later that night, whatever. And they Maxwell and Wolfie were up, and I think they woke Barty up during the midst of all this. And I was showing them some of the stuff where I put them through a table. I showed them where we cooked a little bit, and I showed them steaks we cooked. So my son Woofy said, Guga, actually, my son Woofy asked me, he said, hi, Dad, does your friend Guga, do you think he knows? He says, I really love Gordon Ramsay. Do you think he knows him? I said, actually, I know he does. He was sharing some stories about Gordon Ramsay. So he made this whole video. It was adorable where Woofy called him. I recorded a video. He said, hi, Guga. My dad said that he cooked with you today and that you're one of the best cooks in the world and that you know Gordon Ramsay. It's my dream to be a cook one day. And could you please share some of your recipes with me so I could get started? I really want to be a cook, and one day I want to open my own restaurant. Thank you so much, Guga. Have a great day.
That's amazing. That's so great.
It was so funny.
That's so great. Well, hopefully you learned how to. I'm sure your wife didn't go and she's like, okay, bitch, when are you cooking now for us? Like,
she said, bitch, you're doing Thanksgiving next year. Said, can we cook it on a grill? Can it be all steaks?
Yeah, now you know to scrape the seasoning. You cooked with a lot of live fire, man. That was impressive. It's not easy to do that, especially on the charcoal. I give you a lot of credit. And that was like old school Weber kettle grilling right there. That's the stuff your dad would have done,
100%. That's how my dad would cook. My dad would cook. He'd cook steaks on the grill all the time with charcoal. Yeah. I have very fond memories of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Glad you had a great time. I did too. Yeah. This week's episode, we're going to be talking about Kurt Angle because he just celebrated a birthday. So we want to give Kurt some love and we'll get into the weeds with him. But I do want to talk about, we got Saturday night's main event popping up this week with WWE, and Cody Rhodes is facing Kevin Owens for the WWE Championship. First off, Jesse Ventura coming back to call this show. The whole aesthetic is allegedly going to be somewhat of a throwback visual. What do you think of WWE bringing that brand back? You had a chance to compete on a couple Saturday night main events yourself. So what do you think about that?
I think it's cool. I mean, I think there's a lot of nostalgia for the old school Saturday night main events. I remember I was a huge fan of Saturday night main events. I would love to try and stay up and see that if I possibly could. One of the big events that led us into watching the WrestleMania 4 tournament was, I think it was a Saturday night's main event where they did the referees, right? The Hebners, where they screwed.
Yeah, Earl and Dave. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was a huge deal. And it's like, oh man, now the title's vacant. Like, oh my God, I have to see this tournament. Who's going to win at WrestleMania 4? And I thought that was a real cool angle. I dug that a lot whenever that went down.
So Cody's going to be facing Kevin Owens for the WWE Championship. He's going to be defending it. Kevin Owens, Matt, has not held a singles title in WWE in almost 8 years, which is pretty wild to think about given how frequently he's been featured on WWE programming. He was allegedly going to win the world title in 2019, but that's when Kofi Mania happened instead. Right. So those plans got changed and he just never came back around to it. Do you think there's a chance that they could pull a trigger on a title change here? Because there's a lot of people out there in the wrestling sphere who believe that could happen. And, even if Cody's going to be in a main event at WrestleMania, which I assume he's going to be, that doesn't mean he can't lose it and get the title back before the big show, right?
Sure. It's pro wrestling, so I would never say never. And you never know. I like to keep it unpredictable. My guess is that they'll have a hell of a match, but Cody will retain. But I don't know. I could also be wrong too. I mean, I think Cody is still going to ride high as the top guy and the number one babyface and as the champion.
Okay, but then let me ask this. So is he hurt if he loses the title and then gains it back a month from now?
No, not necessarily. He isn't, especially if it's done in a good way. But I think that Roman Reigns' title reign really made WWE think that having a longer reign puts a lot of stock in something. And it probably depends on what ultimately ends up being the plan for Cody at WrestleMania. Is it worth, doing this quick pit stop with Kevin Owens and then flipping it back to him or whatever it may be? Is that worth stalling the momentum that he's had all the while? And I don't know. I mean, I could see it either way too. I'm not dead set on anything in pro wrestling. I think pro wrestling is subjective, and I think it is something that is constantly changing. And there's always room to do things that are different or out of the box.
Well, I view it as a character journey, right? So Cody has been on top since WrestleMania. He's had a few programs that there wasn't really much to them. He's had a few that did have a lot to them. And he got to team up with the Bloodline at one point, and there was some intensity there. But no one has really gone under Cody's skin as champion since his reign began in the way that Kevin Owens has. And I think the way that they did the heel turn with Kevin Owens was very creative. And it was like collateral almost of the Bloodline story. The Bloodline story happened, and one of my favorite things about the Bloodline story is not even the storyline itself, but the fact that it had a wide-ranging effect across multiple different stories on the main roster. And these characters, unlike in the Vince McMahon era where the characters would forget what happened 3 weeks ago, these characters remember the events that happened a year ago. And that leads to better overall long-term storytelling. And if Cody has to overcome some hurdles here en route to going back to main eventing WrestleMania, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Plus, it gives some equity back to Kevin Owens as a main event guy.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with anything you said. I just my hunch, my guess would be that the WWE want to keep Cody in a long, lengthy run as champion before they have him drop it. But I don't know. I mean, it could be. The Saturday night's main event, is it a live show?
Yeah.
It's live, right? Yeah. I mean, even it being live, like, just makes it a little more unpredictable. Which, who knows? Never say never. I mean, I doubt it will happen, but I wouldn't mind it happening.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping it does. And you come up in the hottest era of wrestling, the Attitude Era, where we remember Stone Cold Steve Austin as a champion. We remember The Rock as champion. Go take a look back in the history books of how long their title reigns were.
Oh,
They were not very long. You were lucky if you got a 2.5-month title reign back then at the top. Title changes happen frequently, and I think we're so preconditioned now in wrestling to the only way a champion is credible is if they have a super long title reign. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Keep in mind, Vince was always of the mindset that, like, titles help a wrestler or the act get over. But if the act is already massively over, then they really don't need the titles. Look at the Hardy Boys tag team title reigns in WWE. They never ended up being long because, like, you really don't need the titles. I mean, people, you're just so over anyway.
No, because what is it about? It's about the journey of getting the titles. And once you get the titles, it's not quite as important.
Then there were also people that he would try and spend time on building into a heel, and then they had heat because they would beat a team that is beloved for the titles, and then they would piss people off while they're the champions and brag about how they're the best in the world or how they're the champions, this, that, and the other thing, and build themselves as a team. The titles are used as a tool to help teams. When we won the titles from the Acolytes, they were used to help us, to help get us over. Whenever we were over and we won them the second time on, we were already more over. We didn't need the titles. I mean, the titles were like a nice decoration and a nice reward for our hard work and our efforts, and people wanted to see us as the champions. But then, like, there really wasn't anything to overcome with us being baby faces.
I also think it's a lot harder when the long title run is on a baby face because there's less for the baby face to overcome. Whereas, when you're a heel who has the title for a long time, there are avenues to them retaining and having that championship for so long. So you're waiting for the baby face to rise and finally take it from them.
Mm-hmm. No, you're correct. And I agree with that sentiment as well. I also want to just circle back real quick and hit on something you said. You said about how these characters in the new booking era remember stuff that happened a year ago or that happened 18 months ago or whatever it may be. And you talked about how that leads to more interesting things. It also leads to a better overall WWE product. And kudos to WWE for, like, keeping that long continuity and making everything seem consistent.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's important in any form of storytelling. Characters should remember things that happened. If you have a sitcom that is a 7-season sitcom, the characters should remember what happened in season 2, in season 7. It's just that's serial storytelling and how it should go. So again, I know wrestling, sometimes we hold the bar a little lower, but I think it's okay for us to hold that higher standard of, this is consistency. That's important to being able to tell forceful and impactful stories. So we'll see. I think we're starting to see the seeds of WrestleMania 41 be planted right now here in December, honestly, where they keep hammering about CM Punk never having the main event at WrestleMania. So it certainly feels to me like one of the nights of WrestleMania, CM Punk's finally going to get his moment. And that's got to be a big thing for him, you'd have to think, right?
I mean, of course. I mean, and also it's something, he hit so hard on that about how that's what he wanted to achieve, and he didn't, wasn't able to, and they never put him on last, and he didn't feel like he actually main evented. So yeah, that's a huge selling point. And because he has made that argument in the past, I think that translates over to the viewers, and they think that would be a big deal for him, and I'm sure he does as well.
Yeah. So we'll see what ends up coming from that. It could be a pretty stacked Mania season. I can't believe we're already rounding third, heading into the home stretch of that time of the year. It feels like just a year ago we're talking about, is Cody going to be the guy? It feels like
Yeah.
yesterday, I should say, and it was almost a year ago. Like, is Cody going to be the guy that finally beat this? And he did. So we'll see how they end up executing the route to this next WrestleMania. I do want to ask you on the AEW front. Tony Storm came back this week, and we saw the vintage Tony Storm character, the rocker, if you will, a break from the timeless Tony Storm that we became so accustomed to. And I know a character you were very high on. What do you think of Tony Storm coming back here and seemingly setting herself back up for a little bit of a throwback?
I saw that clip. I haven't had a chance to watch Dynamite yet, so I was up at 6 a.m. this morning. But I did see on social media, I saw the clip of her coming out. She got a huge reaction. People seemed pretty amped by her being out there. And it was cool that she did that, where she went back to her original character of, regular Tony Storm, rocker Tony Storm. So I'm assuming now her and Marame, they're going to lead to another big showdown for the title. And she's going to try to claim revenge by being her old school Tony Storm. That's what we're doing, I guess, right, John?
I asked you about it because you're someone who's come in and out of characters left and right, and I watched this and I said, okay, I don't think she's actually back as this rocker character. I think they're going to do some sort of an identity crisis thing for her, where she almost is doing split personalities, if you will, and we're not sure which Tony Storm we're going to see. Which, I don't know. I know me some Matt Hardy, and that's like something that'd be right out of your playbook that you'd be pretty interested in.
Yeah, it is. It's tricky. It's tricky to do. It's tricky to do split personalities in wrestling, because I'd given it a shot at one time. That's not saying it's impossible, but it is a tough gig to do. So yeah, I'm very curious of what direction they end up going with this.
We will see what ends up happening from that. I meant to ask you too. The New Day, man, holy shit. The amount of heat that they got in their segment Monday night, they are not afraid at all to be heels and relinquishing that fear of being a jerk, as you always talk about. I know you were high on the angle they did a couple weeks ago, but anything you want to say about those guys coming out and getting that amount of hashtag heat?
It's just it's great to watch them do this, and it's especially great to watch Kofi, undertake this new journey, and I'm really excited to see what they end up doing with this whole angle. I think it's off to a great start, and once again, I really applaud them on relinquishing their fear of being an asshole, because they have both done that.
All right, well, this week's episode of The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy is going to talk about someone who certainly was more than fine with relinquishing his fear of being an asshole, but it may have taken him some time to get there, and we'll get into that. That's all about Kurt Angle. Before we can, though, Matt, you know what I got to ask. Please hit us with that Matt Fact.
Matt Fact: Matt's disdain for winter grows yearly.
Did you get a nice taste of that Miami weather and you were feeling that a little more?
Oh, boy. This morning was freezing. It just made me think about it again this morning. So, too, you were with me a couple weeks ago in WrestleCade, whenever we jumped in my car and we went to that barbecue place. And I told you how my air had just stopped working, right? So I've got to take that and get it fixed. So I came out this morning. It was 31 degrees, and there was frost all over the grass. And then my car, the whole windshield was covered with ice. So I'm out there grinding it off as fast as I can. It's like, fuck, I don't have my defrost to get it done all the way. So I had to do that. And the defrost does work slightly on the inside. And I was just like, what the hell, man? I'm out here rushing. I'm catching this flight anyway. I'm leaving the house, at 7:15 in the morning that catches 9:40 flight. And I'm out there scrubbing ice off with like a t-shirt, and then I'm grabbing another little rag, whatever I could get my hands on real quick, just to keep hustling, keep it moving. I've had enough. This cold weather where you have to take all these precautions and ice and issues. It was cold when you were in town for Winston-Salem. Like, it's too much, man, just too much. I'm still, I don't love it when it's 100 degrees, but like when it's 80 in the 80s, I'm okay with it. I love being able to go outside with the shorts on, and that's it, and not worry about shit.
Dude, I had an audition yesterday in the city, and it was pouring rain. It was like 38 degrees, windy. It was miserable, and I'm in a suit trying to like not get all bundled up, keep the hair upright. And I woke up today, it's 26 degrees. I'm like, I am over this, as Broken Matt Hardy would say. So, if you could delete the cold weather, that would be great on this. I'd be totally fine with that, Matt.
If
All
I
right,
could
man.
turn all this cold weather into a black hole to never be seen again. Just put it
I
out
know.
deep somewhere in space and time.
Dude,
Leave
when
us,
we were
leave
down
us, leave us with the spring. Leave us with the fall.
when we were down in Miami, and just Guga's got this beautiful pool and the yard, and I was just like, man, I was like, what are we doing? What idiots are we? We're stuck where we are. I voluntarily left Orlando. That's the worst part.
Yeah.
Well, hell, Bobby, good afternoon to you. Joining us live here on WrestlingAccordingToAlba.com, where you can
Good afternoon, Bobby.
catch most tapings of the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. All right, folks, this is the holiday season, so that means 'tis the season for gift giving. And why not give the gift of an event that you can share together with your loved ones, your friends, or the 20,000 people around you? You see, Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. And yeah, it's the perfect gift. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste all the time searching through thousands of tickets. Right now, I've got my eyes on some extra tickets for the AC/DC tour that was announced recently. These tickets sold like hotcakes in the holiday season. But that doesn't mean Game Time doesn't have you covered. You weed through some of their limited 13 events on this tour, and you might find yourself some tickets as well. I love the Game Time Picks because it's curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, or whatever. And with their all-in pricing, you can toggle it on and know exactly how much you're going to pay up front. We love transparency here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, and Game Time's going to help you be transparent in the process. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code HARDY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code HARDY, that's HARDY, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Let's talk Kurt Angle, man. It's true, it's true. The 3 I's, intensity, integrity, and intelligence, turned 56 years old this weekend. Matt Hardy, I believe that Kurt Angle is maybe the most complete professional wrestler of all time, combining his athletic skill set, his natural in-ring talent, and his understanding of character work and entertainment that goes into all this. Before we dive deep into Kurt's career, when I say Kurt Angle, what comes to mind for you?
When I think about Kurt Angle initially, I remember hearing about him when he was signing with WWE, and I remember meeting him and just how it almost seemed like he had a very dry personality. He was just like one of these like straightforward, just like kick-ass athletes who was just kind of quiet and just kind of did his thing, but he was a killer whenever he would get you on the mat, right? And that's what it seemed out initially. And even working out with him in the beginning, as he was kind of learning about pro wrestling and whatnot, it just seemed like, I don't know, this guy, does he have a larger than life personality? Is he really going to excel? He's going to be great in the ring because his mechanics are awesome. They're just unbelievable. And he's so physically, athletically gifted. He would probably be great. But just the thing I think about with Kurt Angle was like how I did not expect him to morph into this complete entertaining character that was absolutely amazing, had a great comedic timing, and had great comedic humor, and could just entertain the shit out of everyone out there. He ended up being the ultimate entertainer, and like you said, one of the greatest packages ever in pro wrestling.
Yeah, certainly so. Kurt, as we all know, 1996 Olympics, Atlanta, Georgia. He wins a gold medal with a broken freaking neck. We've all heard the story a million times, but it is one of the greatest athletic accomplishments in American Olympic history. And he tries to figure out what's next. And Kurt actually decides, I'm going to be a sportscaster in Pittsburgh, where I'm from. And Kurt tried his hand at sportscasting. And on his first night on the job, the teleprompter went down right before he was about to go live. He scrambled for his scripts. He had no idea what was going on. And he decided, this ain't for me. Tough job, buddy. I know a little thing or two about it. There's one thing I'm better at in life than Kurt Angle is, and it's that. So he says, okay, how about we try professional wrestling? And Vince McMahon reaches out. Bruce Pritchard reaches out. And Matt, they offer Kurt Angle the largest contract in WWE history for anyone who's never wrestled before. And he responds by saying, I'll do it, but I can't lose. What's the issue at hand there, my friend?
He just did not understand what pro wrestling was. You know, whenever he came into it, he was coming into it blind. You know, he didn't realize that it was an utterly entertainment driven business, and like winning and losing doesn't determine how good you are. You know, much where he comes from that mindset of amateur wrestling and the Olympics of like winning is everything. If you don't win, you're not good. You're not succeeding. You're not excelling. So I think he thought pro wrestling was a little more reality based than it actually was.
There's a lot of Olympians who have tried their hands in the world of professional wrestling. It's worked for some. Mark Henry being one of them, of course. Kurt. There's been some others that it really didn't work out for. Gable Steveson, one of them, nonetheless, relatively recently.
Yeah.
Chad Gable, it has worked out for. He's someone with real Olympic background. But what do you think the key to success is for someone who's coming over from that shoot style world to try to integrate themselves into the wrestling world?
I think the most important thing for any of those guys is to not take yourself too seriously. You know, because you have to kind of check your ego at the door when you're a pro wrestler, and when you're doing pro wrestling, just because sometimes like the wins and losses are insignificant. And sometimes the person who loses in the match succeeds more in the match than the person who won. I think the most important thing is kind of drop that mentality of like winning is everything, and kind of check your ego at the door and realize you're working with someone else, a dance partner, and you're trying to entertain and you're trying to put together a match and a concept that is going to be better for the greater good of the segment.
So he says no to WWE, and they're like, all right, we're moving on. He goes to an ECW show, and they do a crucifixion angle, and he's deeply offended by it, and he's like, I am not doing anything in professional wrestling. Did you ever hear about this story?
Oh, yeah.
What would you hear about it from your perspective?
I mean, I just heard, I know that he had turned down that WWE deal. And then I knew he went to the ECW arena and he saw that and he was deeply upset by the crucifixion angle. And he just said, I'm never doing any of this again. He just like, pro wrestling is trash. I hate this. It's no good. And I don't think he even realized that ECW was what ECW was. It was a different kind of animal at that time. Yeah,
he actually threatened to sue Paul Heyman if his likeness was shown on the same broadcast as this angle. So Kurt was really, really not having it with professional wrestling at this juncture. A couple years later, the calls are made, and he gets a tryout match with WWE. It goes well. He gets a 5-year deal. Needless to say, it is worth a significant lower amount of money than the first deal that he was offered was. So maybe Matt Kurt was a little humbled here and had to go to square one. And he ends up at a place that you're very familiar with because you and Jeff had to cut your teeth there. And that's the Funkin Dojo, which was WWE's developmental camp at the time. For those who have listened to the podcast or maybe are newer to the podcast and don't really know exactly what the Funkin Dojo was, what was it and what was the cast of characters like in there?
The Funkin Dojo was basically the developmental system at that time. It's kind of what they had to work with. They would bring independent talents in or signed talents. Some people weren't signed. Most were signed. You would come up there, and for like anywhere from 12 to 14 days, you would come, you would train for a little over a week. And then during the weekend, as you finished out the show, you would go do spot shows on independent events. You know, we'd go into the Northeast. We'd do stuff in Massachusetts. We would do stuff in wherever there, Massachusetts. We would do Connecticut. We would do indie shows. And you would go out there and you would work with other people from the Funkin Dojo, and they would try and just assess how much you're growing and how ready you are to possibly be part of the WWE roster.
So with a guy like Kurt, is the majority of his time spent trying to learn the craft and less emphasis on working indie matches or anything of that nature? Is he having practice matches? What does that look like for someone with his background?
I mean, when we would go there, like to the best of my best of my memory, whenever we'd go there, say if we're doing 9 days of training and then we're doing 4 days of shows or whatever, 3 days of shows, 4 days of shows. During those 9 days of training, we would be up and we'd be at the gym at 8 a.m. I think you would be up, you'd have breakfast at 7 or 7:30. Then you'd be at the gym at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock. We would go to the ring. We'd start stretching, do whatever. We would have lunch. And then for like 1 o'clock to like 6 p.m. for 5 hours straight, we would like just take bumps. We would train. We would do things. We would learn combinations. We would learn psychology. And that is where Kurt was learning all of this stuff. And then probably for the last hour of the day, we would have matches against one another. They'd say, okay, you have a match, Matt, you have a match against this guy, Kurt Angle, or Matt, you have a match against Andrew Martin, or Matt, you have a match against Glenn Kolka. And then, they'd say you have 8 minutes, put your match together, and they would give you 2 or 3 minutes. And then we would go and call a quick match, and then we'd do it on the show. But Kurt getting in those reps and doing that for 9 or 10 days back to back was super beneficial for him. And even us guys who had wrestled and have been on the scene and kind of half-assed knew what we were doing. It was super beneficial for us to actually hear the technically correct way to do things and to work with Dory Funk Jr. and Dr. John Pritchard, because those guys obviously knew what they were doing. They were both great instructors.
We know Kurt had the natural athleticism and the physical ability, but how quickly did he take to the psychological part of calling a match and learning how do I put an Irish whip into this next move, like putting those sequences together?
He learned quicker than most do. He learned quicker than I think most independent wrestlers do. I mean, he was like a sponge. He absorbed this stuff, and it was so crazy. One of the first practice matches that I had in there, it wasn't the first day, because the very first time that I had a practice match, it was against Teddy Hart. I remember that on my first day at the Funkin Dojo. But on like day 2 or day 3, I had a match with Kurt Angle, and I remember putting him in the corner, and it wasn't the overhand chop like Guga's guys got. It was the just normal chop, and I fired off a couple really good ones, and he looked at me like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like he was gonna like take me down and break my arms. I mean, he gave me that kind of look. And then like afterwards, he just said, "Is that how that goes?" And he said, "Yeah, you do that. You just absorb it. It's gonna, it's a smack. I mean, it's one of those things. A chop is a chop. It's gonna hurt some, but you just absorb it. That's just how it's done." And those things, I think, are the things that Kurt was like, whoa, that kind of like turned on light. Like, oh, there is a lot of this that's very real, and it's like very physical. And you could see that he really became a master of mixing things up as far as doing it safely and looking very intense and explosive whenever you're doing things. Kurt was one of the best guys to ever do that.
So do you think that almost lit a fire with him when he realized that there was a physical intensity to this that he could lean into?
I think so, for sure. Because, I mean, if you watch Kurt's work back, Kurt was extremely safe. He was extremely talented, and he was good. He was very precise with his strikes, with his throws, whatever it may be. But he also put that extra explosion, that he put that Olympic athleticism into it, and it made it look that much more credible. And that's one of the reasons he excelled so quickly.
Broken Matt Hardy can represent a lot of different things, but I can say confidently that we here at the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy are not, and I repeat, not broken below the belt, because the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy endorses BlueChew. You see, BlueChew helps give men longer lasting and stronger erections so you can perform at your very best. BlueChew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in chewable form. The process is super simple too. You sign up at BlueChew.com, you consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you're going to receive your prescription within days. BlueChew tablets are made in the United States and prepared and shipped directly to your door. And the best part, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. Matt Hardy's got that gaggle of kids. He can thank BlueChew for that, because he can be called at a moment's notice. We know Queen Rebecca, she's out there being a viral star. The time together is very limited, And if duty calls, Matt Hardy's ready to go with his pal BlueChew. You see, BlueChew wants you to have the confidence to perform at your best, so discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we got a special deal for our audience here at The Extreme Life. Try BlueChew free. Just pay $5 shipping at checkout when you visit BlueChew.com. That's BlueChew.com to receive your first month absolutely free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy.
His first match on record was at a WWA event in Salem, Massachusetts on August 20th, 1998 against Dr. Tom, of all people. And Dr. Tom defeats him there. And it seems like you guys are doing a lot of New England loops and then a little bit into Tennessee and Memphis with all this Funkin Dojo stuff. How valuable were those live reps for him?
Extremely valuable. I mean, there's no substitute for experience in wrestling. You can wrestle and work out with someone without a crowd until you are in front of a crowd, learning how to listen to the crowd and feel what the crowd is into, what they like, and how to actually work that crowd. That's what you need to do. And after you would spend, 8 or 9 days training and busting your ass, beating yourself up, it was nice to get out and travel around and do some shots and actually get in front of a crowd. And it was a real hot time for pro wrestling then. So even these indie crowds were really good. And it was just such a great barometer to be able to go out. And if you're a bad guy, how can you get the most heat? If you're a good guy, how can you, get the most love? How can people connect with you, emotionally? And Kurt really, he caught on really, really fast. And I never, ever expected him to become the entertainer that he ultimately became, but he did. He was amazing.
And it's very cool because the WWE Vault account, which I know you've become a fan of, and I have as well. I think the WWE Vault should win Promotion of the Year, honestly, in our year-end awards that we're going to do in a couple weeks. But they just posted Kurt's 4th match ever, which is from that loop, and it's him versus Christian. So I think that is so cool that they got that on there. And Kurt's wearing it's not a singlet. It's just trunks with black and yellow because Pittsburgh, right? The Steelers. Right. And he's so raw and unmolded. And to see him in that form is really, really cool. So go check that out if you get a chance to. But from working these shows with him, how long do you think it really took for him to click in and be like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing at this point?
I think he started getting it probably because he had done a couple dojos before we were there, if I'm not mistaken. But I know he was there for R2 because we only ended up doing 2, and then they moved us up to TV. I think he probably did 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken. He stuck around and kept doing them. But I think it really all came together for Kurt whenever they crafted this persona of like, you are like Mr. America, right? You're an Olympic gold medalist. You have this very American patriotic outfit on, and then you go out there and you fight for your country, but then you're kind of hypocritical. I think once they really broke that down, I think that's something that he could lean into, and just his mastery of being, hypocritical, his mastery of being satirical. The way he did things was so great, and it's something I didn't expect from him upon first meeting him, because he just seemed like a guy who was very much a killer athlete, not necessarily had this over the top personality, but he showed that he did.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he has his first match in August, okay? And by April of 99, he has his first main roster match. It's a dark match against Brian Christopher. Right. But he's working Shotgun Saturday night, then he's working Sunday Night Heat in dark matches. He ends up working some house show loops as well against Tiger Ali Singh, where he's picking up wins there. He even faces Owen Hart in a dark match on Shotgun Saturday night, which I think is pretty cool to think about in hindsight. He would go on to face the likes of your boy Meat, even. That's a whole nother story in and of itself. You have your first match with him on the main roster on June 21st, 1999. It's a Shotgun Saturday night taping. It's a dark match at the Pyramid in Memphis, and he actually beats you, Matt. So what are your recollections about that? The first time locking up with Kurt on the main roster, even though he hasn't debuted yet, and he gets a win over you too.
Yeah. Well, they had big plans for him at that time. They knew they had something big plan for him going forward. I enjoyed it. And I was just going to say, we're talking about the WWE Vault account, which is a great account. And I did get to watch back that match you had with him and, the CLP. Got to check that out. But I would like WWE Vault to release that match. Let's put out that match. Kurt Angle versus Matt Hardy, the dark match. Anybody out there that's got any hookups with the WWE Vault account, tell them you'd like to see that. I do remember that I did that move with him. It was controversial. I wanted him to be able to do okay because I had a thing where I would run towards someone like I'm going to clothesline him and his back was against the apron, and then they would duck and they would like backdrop me up, and I would like go and I would stay very rigid and hit the ropes, and I'd bounce down and DDT him on the floor. And we went over it a couple of times, and like every time he threw me up, he did it perfectly, and his balance was so good. It was like so impressive because if someone throws you up like janky to the side or whatever, like the move is a shot. It's not going to work. And I just remember thinking, whenever I did that with him, like, wow, this guy really like has his shit together from a perspective of like technique. And I enjoyed that match. I liked that match a whole lot, and I thought it was good.
I want to ask you about the idea of him working dark matches on the main roster for months before he actually debuts. We don't see that anymore because we got NXT now, and that's just not really necessary. But back in the day, there would be a few guys who you'd hear about and you're like, oh, that they're high on that guy. He hasn't debuted yet, but I know he's going to be a big deal. Brock Lesnar was doing it. Shelton Benjamin was doing it for a long time. What kind of designation was that when these guys would get these long runs on the main roster doing dark matches long before they even debuted?
I mean, that showed that these guys, the company looked at them with great upside. So they wanted to make sure they were ready. They were as they could perfect their craft as much as they possibly could before they stepped onto the big screen and TV on that platform, because they were guys that they really thought could be big deals, and they wanted to season them as much as they possibly could and get them TV ready. And that's why they had those guys doing that so much.
He starts to prepare for his TV debut. They're crafting his character a little more. And as you alluded to, Vince says to him, we want to make you this American hero who has no self-awareness whatsoever. And they lean into the three I's: intensity, integrity, and intelligence, which he, no doubting, regardless of whether he was a babyface or heel, he had the intensity. The integrity, not so much. Kurt was resistant to the idea at first, Matt, because Kurt thought that I'm a legit American gold medalist. There's no way these people are going to boo me. Where do you think the idea truly stemmed from, knowing Vince as well as you did?
I think Vince probably got to know him a little bit, had conversations with him, and they were probably creatively discussing things, and that's just how Vince read that from him. And there are times where Vince has had some insane ideas, but there's also times where Vince has been able to read someone and their character, and like he sees things that they could become in his mind. And I've heard Kurt talk about that, about how he didn't want to be. At first, he thought like, well, I'm going to be a hero and I'm going to do this. And he said like, oh my God, I had no idea what I was talking about. He said, I'm so glad I just shut up and listened and ended up doing what they asked. But it ended up being perfect. Like, it couldn't have been better. Like, especially as times were changing a little bit right there, coming out someone who is like a legitimate American hero, because they are an Olympic gold medalist who won with a broken freaking neck. And then this guy's coming out and he's not self-aware, and he's saying these things like, you know, almost condescendingly, and he's very hypocritical, and like he has this incredible satire. You know, it was a great ingredient for a successful wrestler, and Kurt was the guy that could do it better than anybody. Did
you start to see Kurt's personality come out a little more around that time as you're getting to know him in the dojo, you're getting to know him in developmental?
100%. Well, once he was got, I saw his personality really started to peak and come out when he started coming to the road and doing dark matches. Because I remember it was like cool. Like, you know, we spent time with him. Obviously, we traveled with him some when we were doing those Funkin Dojo loops, doing the Northeast. And whenever he started coming to TV and doing dark matches, and you could see he was really vibing, and he'd really kind of found himself in what he was doing. You could see his personality was really starting to ooze out of him.
Was he a little more rigid at first?
Yes, very, so rigid. That's why I was shocked. Like, I was like, well, if this guy, if he's, super stoic and doesn't have a ton of personality, it's going to be tricky to make this guy get a huge connection with the fan base. And that's one of the things that was so shocking, and just the way his personality blossomed and the way his character and persona blossomed was just a sight. It was an absolute pleasure to behold. And he really did. He started off, and probably a big part of it was this was a different world to him. Pro wrestling, like he's never seen anything like this shit. He's just like a straightforward athlete who goes out, and if I have to wrestle a match, I just go out and I kick their ass. I don't have to like entertain anybody. I don't have to tell jokes. I don't have to be sarcastic. I don't have to be act like I'm unaware, whatever. I do my job. I'm a machine. I go out and I do my job like a machine. This is something pro wrestling where you just can't go out and be a machine. You have to have these entertainment aspects. You have to have these entertaining factors. And once he understood that, man, he really grew to gravitate towards that character, and he killed it.
Kurt gets the call up Survivor Series 1999. He defeats Sean Stasiak. He almost immediately picks up some legitimate heat. Like the crowd is really against him from the get-go. I think the crowd understood the assignment with this character, and he leaned into it well. But if you go back and you watch Kurt's early stuff, he really is not confident on the microphone at all. He's very much still trying to find his own. And people talk about how that first rookie year for Kurt, 2000, where he wins the WWE Championship a year into his career, that is the true progressional stage where you see him come into his own as a confident character on the television program and as a performer. Right. What did you make of Kurt's first year in the company, where he goes from the Eurocontinental champion to mingling with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon into eventually becoming the WWF champion?
I mean, it was great too. Like the stories about the love triangle with him, and
it was compelling as hell.
It was so compelling. It was so good. And just like, I know myself and Jay or Christian, just watching Kurt do this super entertaining role in this soap opera, we were like, man, wow, he's really come so far. It's crazy, like how far he's come and how entertaining he really is. That was amazing. One of the other things I still love too, how he was never afraid to make fun of himself. When he did the thing with Stone Cold during that whole invasion, he was wearing this silly little cowboy hat that had the little chin strap on and stuff like. He loved all that stuff, and he embraced it, because he got to the point in pro wrestling where he really got what pro wrestling was about.
Let me ask you, we remember Team ECK, where he's working with Edge and Christian, of course, in 2000. Do you think working with those guys helped bring a little bit out in him?
I'm sure, yeah, because they were both extremely larger than life, over the top personalities. So yeah, I'm sure it did. I'm sure that was even better, and I'm sure he enjoyed doing that as well, because everybody was friends behind the scene. We had to have a couple matches. I know there was one on TV. I don't know if we did this on the road at all, but we did the ECK versus myself, Jeff, and Steve. I know we had a match at one point, which was cool, I think.
Yeah, and it was, let's see here. Well, I was going to ask you this. Your first match actually with him, this is so funny, on the main roster on TV, is him teaming with Steve Blackman versus you and Jeff, which is so bizarre. But it was actually Chris Jericho and you guys versus ECK in May 9th. And then you face him with The Rock as well. You team with The Rock, okay. And then you team with Chris Benoit against them.
My bad.
Yeah, and then there's actually, we'll get into it in August of 2001, but you team with Kurt too against Austin and the Dudleys. So there's a lot of intermingling going on there. But I want to ask a little more importantly, we know famously during this time, Kurt curries some favor with Brian Gewirtz, who's got some power as a top writer in WWE at the time, and he becomes a prominent character on the program. And eventually, as I said, by the end of 2000, he's the WWE champion. I famously think about Armageddon 2000, where it's the 6-man Hell in a Cell match with every single top player in the company, and Kurt wins. He beats them all. Were there any people at the top who were maybe a little bothered by Kurt's meteoric rise and the favor that he was garnering at the top of the card?
I don't know. I don't remember anyone that was outspoken about it, but I do know that once Vince McMahon has invested in a project and he thinks it's becoming successful and it was his thing, he was going to make sure his top stars do what he wants to do. And I'm absolutely sure that's how that match where Kurt Angle won was as well. Like, Kurt is my guy. I'm building for the future. This guy's got it. He's where I want to be right now. And he is going to win this title tonight. And those guys were they were going to listen to him. They were going to respect Vince's thoughts.
Yeah, and he has an incredible first few years there. In 2002, he gets into a program with your pal Adam Copeland Edge, and they're feuding, and they have a hair match, hair versus hair. During this feud, Edge, well, he spurs quite a chant from the crowd that would follow Kurt for the rest of his career. And Bobby says, "Ask Matt, what did you think of the 'You Suck' moniker?"
I mean, it's great when you have something like that, like the "You Suck," that the crowd can do over and over, and the crowd enjoy doing it, and it's fun for the crowd to do it. That's a gift. That's a gift sent from God.
It certainly was something that Kurt. And was he at the point where he understood the assignment that this was something he could lean into and entertain with?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Because he gets shaved bald, and he does the whole program where he refuses to admit that he's bald. He's wearing the little wigs in the wrestling. I mean, it's great stuff. He so immediately understood that you have to lean into the silliness, and it elevated him, at least I think. How do you think that affected his ability to climb the card and understanding that you have to lean into the goofiness?
I mean, it is. I mean, there's times where you have to be serious, but there's also times where it is beneficial for you and your character and your persona to be fun and to have fun and to be silly. And I think one thing about that, which we all thought was real cool, I thought it was a good elevating moment for Adam. I think Edge was elevated through that for sure, because Kurt was, everybody was buddies there, and Kurt wanted to work with him, and he wanted to help elevate him, because he'd gotten a rub off so many of the other top guys, the Stone Colds and the Triple H's and Rocks and whatnot. So yeah, I thought that was a very beneficial program for both guys.
Yeah, certainly so. Kurt is a firm main event guy at this point. Top guy on SmackDown. He and Brock. He makes Brock, right? Like, that's a huge program.
Right.
He's critical in elevating him. Team Angle with Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. It's amazing stuff. Going into the mid-2000s, has that dynamic WrestleMania match with Shawn Michaels that is an all-time classic. But Kurt was really struggling, Matt, with injuries and drug abuse at this point, at the opioids especially. That was really prevalent in the locker room and in wrestling culture at the time. How did you notice that affecting Kurt and setting up what his trajectory would be for his eventual WWE exit?
It was a pretty well-known issue, I would say. There was actually one time where John Laurinaitis asked me, myself and Shane, he said, "Hey, I'll pay for your car. I'll pay for your car if you guys will drive Kurt around." And we did that for a while, where we were like, not necessarily chaperones, but they would just want to make sure he made the talents and that he was okay, whatever. And I knew when that was happening, they obviously had a close eye on him, and they wanted him to, be taken care of. People knew, and it was around, and it's one of those things where it was tough to watch, and sad too, because Kurt was someone that was so great and so passionate, and he was just beat up, and he was hurt so bad because he would go so hard, and he was, doing whatever he felt like he had to do at this point to like try and make it through another match. And it just was one of those things where it got a hold of him, and it had its teeth sunk in very deeply.
What did you think of Vince's relationship with Kurt at that time?
I mean, Kurt always, I remember him often interacting with Kurt almost much like a father-son relationship, where he was like one of his favorite guys. He would be real sweet. He'd be intimate with him, with the way he would talk to him and the way he would play with him or slap him on the back or try and take him down or whatever it may be. They had a great relationship. At this time, I would imagine it was strained. I would imagine Vince had probably pulled him to the side and said, like, "Get your shit together." It's almost like, I feel like what a Vince would say, like, "Get your shit together. Yeah. Come on. We got to do this."
Well, just because Kurt was such a company guy. I mean, he did everything Vince asked him to. So that's what I'm curious about. But eventually, it's just determined it's not going to work out. Kurt asks for his release. He gets it. And he goes to TNA, where he spends more time of his in-ring career there than he did in WWE. And Kurt becomes a tippy-top guy in TNA. He has, in my opinion, some of the very best matches of his entire career with the likes of Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, and he's almost the face of the franchise there. What do you think of Kurt's initial TNA run?
I remember realizing it was a big deal whenever he first showed up. Whenever he came up from the Brood entrance, and debuted, it was good. It was good, and it was good for TNA at that time, just because it helped elevate TNA as a company, and hopefully they could be like another place that guys could go and they could work and they can make a great living off pro wrestling. Just Kurt being there was obviously going to help that. So I remember thinking like, Kurt is a talented guy. He's doing killer stuff, and you just hope that the person on the inside of that character that he's doing okay.
He spends 10 years in TNA, and you have a chance to have one final match with him on January 9th, 2016. You're the world champion. You face him in his home state of Pennsylvania. You pick up the win. It's a 14-minute match. It's the last time you ever wrestled Kurt after all those times in the dojo and coming up through the years. What do you remember about that last match you had with him?
I remember he knew he was on his way out of TNA, and we were talking. I said, "Oh yeah, I like what you're doing." He said, I said, "What do you want to do tonight for the finish or whatever?" I was up for whatever, and I'm a shitty heel. He said, "Oh no," I said, "I'm, my time here's coming to an end before too long." He said, "So just beat me with your finish." He said, "That'll help you more than me. It's not going to hurt me." He said, "Just beat me with your finish." I remember that was his response, and he was great. He was great to work with.
Yeah, even at that stage with his body broken down, he was still easy peasy.
Yeah, no, he was great, man.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And
he was one of those guys too, much like I'd said Eddie would do. Like Eddie and Kurt are the two examples I think of a lot. Like you see these guys who are like all beat up, and they're just like, oh, they're like, oh, and they're like, oh, how you doing today? Oh, I'm just so sore. I'm okay. But then once they go through the curtain and that red light's on, it's true. And they're bouncing, and they're just like, they're like conserving all of their energy for every waking day for that 20 minutes they're going out through the curtain.
I get it, man. I feel that even in TV, where throughout the day I'm pretty easy keeled, easy going, and then once that light goes on, it's like, all right, here's the energy, because you got to save it for that, and you channel the adrenaline with it. So I understand that mentality from them. He does go back to WWE. He gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he has one last little in-ring run. Again, his body's pretty broken down at this point, but I think it was really nice that Kurt had a chance to say goodbye to the fans and the company that made him who he was. What do you remember about working with Kurt during that last run? You don't get a chance to actually wrestle him, but you were there and seeing some of the adoration thrown his way.
I was happy for him. I was happy he got to go back home. He got to go to, the place that made him into a global star. And I was happy that he got to go into the Hall of Fame. And I'm going to say this right here. Someone can clip this and you can post it. Kurt, I'm so sorry we stole your fireworks at WrestleMania 33. That was not our intention. That was a Vince call. We had nothing to do with that. I was hands off, right? Vince was
it's been a while since you've told this story, so why don't you reshare it with everyone?
He was in the moment. Oh, well, so we do the deal where the Hardys return, right? And like Vince thought it was going to be a great reaction. And then when we go out, I think the reaction was even more epic than he expected. And, just so many people went nuts in the arena. So many people went nuts worldwide, whatever else. And then it felt like it was a real huge deal. And at the very end, we were celebrating, and we didn't have any fireworks or whatever. It's just supposed to be us celebrating. Hey, we're back, whatever. And Vince said, "Shoot those fireworks! Shoot the red, white, and blue ones. This is shoot those fireworks now!" And they said, "But they're for her. Shoot the damn fireworks now, you son of a bitch!" And then fireworks are going off, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's so cool! I didn't even know that we were going to have fireworks tonight." And then lo and behold, Kurt didn't have them for his deal because Vince sacrificed his fireworks for the Hardy segment because he thought the Hardy segment was so good.
Well, to be fair, you asked someone about WrestleMania 33. What do they remember? Do they remember the Hardy Boys return? Do they remember Kurt Angle standing on the entranceway? So, with all due respect to Kurt, I think that's
those two things do coincide.
Yeah, I think it's more than fair. His last match, it's a bit of a controversial one. It's at WrestleMania 35, and it's against Baron Corbin. And they have a match towards the end of this 5-hour show. There's not a whole lot that happens in it. Kurt goes for the moonsault, no water in the pool, end of days, 1, 2, 3. And Kurt's been on the record that he had no problem putting Baron Corbin over. That's what Vince wanted him to do, and he liked Baron Corbin personally, but it wasn't the final match that he wanted to have. What did you think about him getting Corbin as his last match? And if you didn't like it, who should it have been?
I don't know. I'm not too, if he was cool with it, then I feel like I'm cool with it. It would have been nice for Kurt to like go out on some great high note or whatever, even if he had a match against, someone who was a tippy top star at that time and put them over. That would be a great way for him to go out too. But like, if Kurt was cool with it and he was trying to elevate somebody on his way out, and that was obviously Vince's mindset. I don't know if that worked out looking back, in hindsight, but it is what it is. And I think we just have to be very grateful for the moments we are given that are really good, So I don't have a lot of critiques for it. I mean, could it have been a better final match? Probably, but it is what it is, and you deal with what you have to work with.
It's just surprising because Kurt was such a legend, and again, nothing against Baron Corbin, who I thought Baron Corbin was honestly very underrated, but it just seemed like it was such a layup to have him face John Cena or something in that last match. Yeah. Cena didn't even wrestle on that WrestleMania. He showed up in a cameo. It just seems like you could have gone out there and made the fans happy with one last, regardless of the quality of it, just putting the 2 stars together and having one last go. So it just seems like that would have been a layup. But nonetheless, a hell of a career. What do you think Kurt's legacy is in wrestling, Matt, at the end of the day?
I mean, Kurt's legacy for sure is one of the greatest, like real athletes, an Olympic gold medalist, one of the greatest to ever be able to transcend Olympics and pure amateur wrestling into pro wrestling, and being able to end up mastering it and becoming a master entertainer as well. There's a lot of guys who are tremendous athletes, but then they don't necessarily have the personality and the pizzazz to make it in the pro wrestling world, or they don't get it about how it's entertainment. Sometimes you lose, sometimes you win, but that's not necessarily what the end of the conversation is about. The end of the conversation is like, what did your segment accomplish in that ring while you were with your opponent? And I think Kurt understood that better than anyone. And on top of that too, he was such a huge company guy. He never told people no. He did media all the time. He busted his ass every single match. He busted his ass to a fault, where he hurt himself and he was legitimately banged up all the time, which can lead to darker days. But Kurt is just a guy who was an absolute workhorse, and a guy who absolutely grasped pro wrestling as a true bona fide athlete, better than most anyone ever else has.
I think the Shawn Michaels feud best encompasses Kurt Angle, because they have this badass WrestleMania match that many think is one of the greatest WWE matches of all time. And then in the build-up to that match, he does the "I'm just a sexy Kurt" segment. And that is the perfect picture of who Kurt Angle was as a performer. In a nutshell. Listen, man, he was one of my all-time favorites growing up. The fact that I got a chance to work with both of you, 2 of my all-time favorites, is something that is never lost on me. And I loved doing podcasts with Kurt, and I was very grateful for that chance to do that. So I got a lot of love for Kurt. I know you got a lot of love for Kurt too. And it's just all-time great. And happy birthday to Kurt on behalf of the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. And
yes, sir.
We hope that you don't get deleted anytime soon, as Matt extends his best wishes. Fun episode here of the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. We remind you, if you were on your Spotify Wrapped or your Apple Music recap, send them our way. We keep getting a bunch. And it's funny, I saw a couple messages this week. They posted their Spotify Wraps, and someone was like, "Oh, I didn't know Matt Hardy had a podcast." Yeah. I was like, well, guess what? We got 150 plus episodes for you to go binge right freaking now at extremehardy.com.
Bingo.
Never too early, never too late to binge some Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. And of course, you head on over to advertisewithhardy.com. You promote your business to the extreme. Get out in front of thousands of listeners and viewers every single week. That's advertisewithhardy.com. Matt, you got a busy weekend ahead of you. Anything else you want to add here?
First and foremost, I was just going to say, if you are just discovering the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, it's never too late. This is the perfect time to discover it. As John said, we have 150 plus episodes in the can. You can watch it every single week we're doing this. Happy birthday, Kurt Angle. I hope you're good. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. And I love you, buddy. All the best, and hope everything's great in your life. And with that being said, I am here in Atlanta. I'm getting ready to go climb some ladders and fall off the ladders and get beat up with chairs and ladders and go through tables. And tomorrow I'm going through more tables. And Saturday I'm facing PCO and Sami Callihan. So it's going to be an insane weekend. Hopefully the man who will not die won't die this week.
Oh, Matt Hardy will not die. Oh, it's true. It's true. This has been the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. We'll see you next time.
Street!
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. Do the holidays have you feeling stressed? SaveWithConrad.com can help you pay off all of your high interest rate credit cards and get a cheaper monthly payment. We're routinely helping listeners save over $1,000 a month, and you can even skip your next 2 house payments. That's right, no payments until February. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, and it just takes about 10 minutes to get started. So don't put Christmas on a credit card. Start saving today and make this the best Christmas ever at SaveWithConrad.com.